They will suck the blood out of you and then throw you away when they've finished. Perhaps I better not put that on the tape, right?
Peter Goldsbury です。今日は2人で
When I started, I didn't have any idea what Aikido was supposed to be. It was a martial art of some sort. Oh yeah, it's Aikido. Well, we don't, yeah. You go on the mat and you're thrown and so on. And it was interesting. I didn't practice it for a particular reason. It was something interesting to do, right? And I got to know the teacher. He told me of this strange martial art based on love. And I was studying philosophy at the time at the University of Sussex, and I thought, this is no, it's not possible. And so I dismissed it. He was a third Dan, had been captain of the club in the University of Tokyo. He invited me onto the mat, and I think he used Shihonagi somehow. I remember going down immediately and thinking, oh, very interesting. His English was not very good, I think. So he showed. And so it was a way of teaching that I've become more accustomed to over the years. He showed without much physical explanation, without much verbal explanation. And it was very attractive. The idea was that you had a kind of psychophysical relationship with the person you were training with, and if he attacked, you were supposed to emerge in an advantageous situation. If you were the attacker, again, the situation was reversed. So it was really quite fair. There was no competition at all. Of course, we weren't particularly fit, even though at the time I used to do running, long-distance cross-country running. And so I had plenty of stamina, but there were some muscles that didn't really get exercised. Now, he, as I found out afterwards, was attached to a dojo, which I think would normally be thought of as rather right-wing in Japan. Politically. Well, they are, but that one is especially so. I mean, that was right-wing, proudly displaying it, right, in the Shiseikan dojo. And so at the time that he practiced with us, he was concerned to portray the emperor and the emperor system in a way that he thought had to be understood by non-Japanese. And we didn't really either understand it, or what we understood we didn't agree with, right? Because we had also read our histories of World War II, right? And, we made our own conclusions, and aided by parents and friends who actually fought in the war, right? And so, and then having met, and I still know him, we are friends, we still correspond from time to time, though he's got older now, right? He went back to Japan, and I used to go to the dojo of Chiba Sensei in London. And Chiba Kazuo Sensei was quite different. I mean, the way he taught, the way he practiced, the way he handled himself. I think he felt himself as the closest thing to a traditional Japanese samurai. And the way he interacted with his students, to my mind, was problematic. his own students wouldn't agree at all. I mean, he was a fantastic teacher, right? And okay. And then I tried to resolve the contradiction, well, the clash of temperaments between those two. My subject area was philosophy, and I had decided to begin at the beginning, and I was studying ancient Greek philosophy, pre-Socratics, Plato, Aristotle, Stoics. But to do that properly, you need Greek. And so Sensei didn't offer Greek, so I went to America and got a scholarship at Harvard University in the classics department. Well, my friend, initial Japanese friend who was a teacher, he approached the Aikikai and gave me the name of a teacher named Kanai Mitsunari Sensei, who was Chiba Sensei's school friend. Right? Again, he was quite different as well. Right? He wasn't trying to be a samurai in any sense of the word. He was practicing. He liked it. He'd been sent to teach in America, which he did. Didn't like the politics. He simply got on with practicing. And he also did Iaido with a few of his Japanese Yudansha. So I had 2 years there. Why? Because Harvard was a very political university, and my supervisor went back to England. And so I decided to follow him back. I went to the University of London, and the teacher there was a man named Minoru Kanetsuka. I was at University College, and there was a dojo at the college, and so I was able to resume my Harvard-type existence and train and do my PhD as well. And so that provided a good balance. I got my Shodan in London from Kanetsuka Sensei, and then became a kind of junior instructor in the main dojo in London. And we had to keep a diary of what we taught. It was a very conservative setup. We always began with a big warm-up and then with Shomaji Shiswara was Ikkyo, then Hami Handachi. We then would do other taijutsu techniques, and then in the second part of the class we'd do weapons. And Kanetsu had a makiwara, and you've seen that outside in the garden, and we would do uchikomi, tanren-uchi. And at the time, he was attracted to the style of Saito Sensei, because the books had come out at that time, and he was studying them. And only later did I find out that there were political issues here, right? And there was Iwama, and there was Tokyo. The experience of training in America was different from the experience of training in England, which was different again from the experience of training with Tao-san the first time. And then going back to England again and seeing Kanetsu Sensei, who was Chiba Sensei's successor, if you like, and the problems he had with Chiba's own students, who was senior. His Aikido was very nice, very good, right? But I kept thinking, well, what is an Aikido sensei supposed to be? What's he supposed to do? What would be the job description apart from learning the techniques and teaching them? What are you supposed to be? Especially now when some of the more traditional Shihans complain that it's too much of a business, right? So in some sense, their idea is that it must be a kind of vocation. All of my teachers, in fact, with no exception, have been Japanese. One question is your main focus of Aikido on the techniques or on the teacher? You practice Aikido to learn techniques or whatever. I mean, waza, I think, is a better, I don't like the word techniques, really. In my own case, finding a teacher was really secondary because it depended initially on where I was. Then I would look for a dojo and then go and learn from the teacher in the dojo. Other people didn't do this. Other people found a teacher and kept with that teacher for most of their Aikido lives. Some people would say that unless you find a teacher that you like, you fit, you can't really start. I don't really agree. And I think that the way you go to a dojo and learn about the art and the art fits you and the way you fit the art is different from person to person. And so I found it useful to learn basics from 3 different teachers, right? Because it was a good learning experience for that, right? But I never focused especially on one. This is again, it's another thing about Aikido. You don't stop training. You don't stop training, but you don't stop learning something. I mean, as I've got older, I've had to rebuild the way I practice, right? Because, you know, I'm no longer a 20-year-old, right? 30 or 40-year-old, right? And so you have to do this, right? Now, so to my mind, it's the principles defining the art that are the most important, and not the teacher who manifests the art at any one time, right? Different teachers have different ways of doing it, right? And that's okay, not a problem. But my own focus is not. In a way, it's chicken and eggs, I suppose, because you go to a dojo and then you learn what you can learn from the teacher in the dojo and other people. And that adds to the stock, if you like, of your Aikido knowledge, however you want to call it, right? But I didn't, with Chiba Sensei, I did find people who actually believed Chiba Sensei was a fantastic teacher, as he was, but he was the only one. Other teachers weren't really a factor. And I didn't really share that view. When I was at Harvard, I had plans of going to Japan. And the reason for this is that I bought a book called Aikido, written by Kishomaru Ueshiba. I think you know the book, the English book, with photographs of a young Tamara and a young Chiba taking ukemi. And in the book, there was an explanation of the founder and Aikido and so on. And training in Japan seemed to be attractive. I had been told by Chiba Shihan, do not go to Japan just to practice Aikido. That is a major mistake that many people make, right? He said, go to Japan with another means of support and another reason for existing other than Aikido. That was his advice, and I followed it. And so it meant finding a university, because I thought it was very difficult to go and work for a company. And I'm an academic, right? And so I did this, and eventually I was offered positions, and the one that I chose was at Hiroshma University. And so I came here, right? And this house had been lived in by a professor, right? And I have an arrangement such that I actually don't own it, but I actually partly own it. I rebuild it as and when it needs rebuilding, right? And the neighborhood, it's a traditional Japanese neighborhood, and all the neighbors have been here also for years. And so I'm known as the foreign teacher. And I'm sensei, basically, in the neighborhood. People everybody knows who I am. And so I became embedded, if you like. To do this, you need Japanese. There's no question. And so Hiroshima is not like Tokyo, where you can get away with very little Japanese. You need Japanese here. There is a very strong dialect also, and I had no idea what my Aikido teacher was saying to me for the first few years I was here. When I came, a colleague took me to Tokyo, and I went to the Hombu. And I had met Kishomaru Ueshiba in America before. Very interesting. I mean, in America I was practicing hard, right? Kishomaru's way of doing it was very smooth and very circular. He was very frail in many ways. And clearly he knew what he was doing. Now, I hadn't talked to him So when I met Kishimaru in the Hombu, I went to the house next door to the dojo, was invited in, and I was with Fujita Shihan. Now I found out later that Fujita Shihan had actually started the dojo in Hiroshima when he was a student at Tokyo Hombu University. And so he went back a long way with the teacher here, whose name was Kitahira Sensei. And so I met Fujita Sensei, and we had a little tour of the Hombu, and then we went to the house, and I met Kishimaru, and we sat down and had some tea. His wife brought in some tea and some okashi, and we had a talk. Was very happy that I'd come to Japan and was in Hiroshima. Unfortunately, it was a bit far away from Tokyo, but he hoped I would come to the Hombu as often as possible and practice. My colleague was translating, and when we'd finished the interview and we were walking down the narrow street from the Hombu to the main road, I asked him, he said, well, I've got mixed feelings about this actually. Yeah, it's Aikido, the martial arts. The martial arts have a very negative sort of cachet in Japan, right? And so if a daughter of mine wanted to marry a Hombu Shihan, I'd be very severely, I'd have big problems. And I thought, very interesting. One thing I did was to stop teaching Aikido. I went to the dojo. Fujita Sensei had told the teacher here, and I began to go to the dojo. I became a member. I became independent, for want of a better word, in around 2003 or 4, right? And so 25 years or so, I trained in that dojo, probably all the time. And so that's a long period of time under one teacher, I think. And when I first came, I can remember, they do it here quite differently. It was rather old-fashioned. And I saw Kitahira Sensei do stuff that I'd never seen before. And that was, again, very interesting. It was a very sharp, straight Aikido, lots of atemi. And one thing that was interesting was that 3 Shihans would come from the Hombu every year. There was normally Friday, Saturday and Sunday training session. And the spring seminar would be run by Tada Sensei. The autumn seminar by Yamaguchi Sensei. And then in between, there'd be a seminar with Fujita Sensei, but he would sometimes give up his place to another Shihan. And so Rinjiro Shirata Sensei came down here once, and later Saito Sensei as well. And I knew him from before, so I was able to partner him with sword work on the Sunday. So that was a very good kind of background, right? Kitahira Sensei is now 8th Dan, I think. And we would practice, for example, once he stopped everybody and said, okay, now let's do Iriminage. And for 2 hours, we practiced Iriminage. He invited all the senior Yudansha to come on and show what you did. And we all said, look at the way the feet and the hands and the head. It's very interesting. It's Iriminage, but it's all different. And I was also invited, right? And I went up, and we were doing it the way that you cut down, make a circle, and then throw, just like Kishimaru Sensei used to do it, right? And the way I moved, he said, you're not moving the same way as we are. And I think my feet, I was somehow going forward rather than going backwards. Now, I was amazed because Kitahira Sensei had no problem with actually asking everybody to show and then stealing, borrowing, using what he saw. And that, to my mind, was a very good way. Kitahira Sensei was unusual in the sense that he didn't expect us to imitate his waza. it was very difficult to do sometimes. And he was quite old. His ukemi wasn't very good because he wasn't young, but he was quite strong. But also he was also learning. I haven't met him for a good while, but he used to practice, research all the time. And so, to my mind, that was, it's a good dojo to go to. I don't know. The Hombu is the Hombu, and I've heard conflicting stories about it, about training there. And in the Hombu, there are a large number of teachers. I suppose you're meant to go to all the classes, but I suppose eventually you tend to favour one or two teachers over the others, right? I know Arikawa Sensei told me very proudly that there are very few students in his classes. I didn't ask him why, because it was pretty obvious why, seeing him on the mat. Anyway, he didn't mind this, right? And so, but here, Kitahiro Sensei always taught. Eventually, I would sit with him when the Dan examinations were held, because I would always ask people to do things that they hadn't prepared for. And he found that entertaining in many ways, because there was always a panic. I would ask for something and they hadn't, especially the students, they hadn't practiced it, and they would go, oh, he's asking for this, and so there were little groups behind the main lineup, sort of frantically practicing the technique so that when their turn came, they would know. And of course I could see it, and so they always got asked something different they hadn't prepared for. Kitahiro Sensei did not like students going to other dojos. He made that very clear. And so I happened to be teaching in another university titled Hiroshma Univesirty as a part-time teacher, and there was an Aikido club. Now I wouldn't do this, but initially I went and I asked somebody, a colleague, about Aikido in Shudo, and they said, oh, well, go and practice, right? And so I went and met the instructor, who was a student of Nishio Sensei. And then I met all these other people who came from the main dojo and said, Peter, don't tell anybody that I'm practicing here. Keep it secret. And I thought, how very interesting. Yes, well, and I did, of course, but it was Nishio Aikido. But I couldn't train. If it were found out that I was training there, then there'd be a terrible explosion. And Nishio Sensei was a very interesting person, quite different. And I can remember once with a certain Hombu Shihan being told in great detail why Nishio Sensei both was and was not a Hombu Shihan. The intellectual gymnastics were really quite interesting. One of the reasons why I got to know him quite well was that I told you that there was a dojo in Saijo, Higashi Hiroshima. And that was started by two colleagues of mine. A lady named Caroline Funk. I met her first. She had come to Hiroshima University and she was in the same faculty as I was. I mean, they were there with her husband, Werner Steinhaus. Now, they said, Peter, we need to open a dojo. Why don't you open a dojo? And I said, well, I was actually quite happy training in Kenshibu, as it was, the main dojo, right? But I encountered problems because the two Germans had a very clear idea of what they wanted to do. I was regarded as the senior of the three. Kitahiro Sensei and I sort of gradually fell apart in this respect because that caused me to think about issues like, well, I'm doing my Aikido and not his or theirs. And so those were questions I'd not really thought about before. But I agreed to start a dojo. We eventually worked out a common framework so that when we opened the dojo, there'd be no major conflicts in how we actually taught the classes, right? Because the the dojo was going to be run by 3 of us, not by one, right? And so that's how it's worked. And I think we finished, I think we're in our 12th year now, I think. So now the membership is about 50, and of those, I mean, there are about 20 there at any one time. Well, in one sense, it's a typical local dojo. There are no non-Japanese students, except for one man who is, I think, Korean. I think there's a Chinese as well. But the teachers are all foreign. And I don't know of any other dojo in Japan that's quite like this, right? Where I'm the chief instructor, but Carolyn and Werner, they instruct together, you know, I mean. So it's really a dojo where the teaching is shared. And so the students also learn to see 3 different ways of doing it, right? Because I've trained for so long that it sort of comes out. I mean, I just do what I do, and sometimes I forget the rules that we agreed. And so sometimes I don't do Ikkyo quite correctly in the way that they've established, but they know. The students, we now have, I think the senior students are now Sandan. And so it's followed a typical trajectory. And the only difference is that the dojo is a general dojo for Japanese people, and all the teachers are foreign. And to my mind, it's a very good situation, right? How it will continue, I don't know. I mean, I have no plans to go back to England, but I can't see myself training when I'm 100 if I ever live that long. So it might well be that they will take over, that the students will take over. And that's fine. I mean, we have enough students who want to do this. When we built the dojo, initially, the prefecture association approached us and said, hadn't you better be independent? Because your dojo is in a very unusual situation. And I asked the Hombu, and Doshu said, no, keep it a member of Kenshibu at the moment. Join the local organization. And we did, but stresses and strains, you know, it was we'd somehow changed, right? And so, to my mind, it would have been better to have been independent to begin with. And eventually that happened, and it happened really because I was very noisy in informing the Hombu of what was going on. And eventually they said, okay, go your own way. And, I received the permission to hold downgrading examinations and grade. That's how it followed. Now, that set a precedent. And it's more generally accepted that if a Hombu Shihan comes and does a seminar, then they will invite you from other dojos, which are not directly in that group. When I started practicing in Japan, in Hiroshima, I practiced with the other dojo members, and I got to know a few people. And one of them, whom you will meet, I've practiced with him for years. His name is Motooka. And when I became independent, he wanted to be independent too. He has the idea of keeping the old type of Aikido alive somehow, much more traditional, the way it was taught, say, 30 or 40 years ago. And he thinks it's changed. And I don't think I can deny this, that it has changed in some respects. Right? Anyway, he wanted to know how he could do it, whether he could follow the same pattern as I did. So I took him to the Hombu once and introduced him to Doshu, and we talked. And I think we met Osawa Sensei, who was in charge of the Japanese Dan structure and whatnot. And he said, well, you can't give your own Dan ranks yet, but what you should do is ask somebody who can. So I was asked if I would go to the dojo to be the chief instructor. And I was a bit I said yes, but you know, it was a bit difficult because he was actually senior to me in terms of Dan rank, right? And here was I going into his dojo, and you know, he had his own way of practicing as I had mine, and so it then occurred to me, the best thing to do is weapons. Moto Oka-san eventually was given permission to give his own grades to recommend promotion, and the arrangements are that he does the Q grades and I do the Dan grades in the dojo. I had picked up from training with Chiba Sensei, and especially going to summer schools in America. I'd learnt the 31 Jo kata, and I'd learnt the paired kata as well, right? And also the 13 awase and the kumitachi and so on, right? Now, Kirihiro Sensei had serious rank in Jiu-Jitsu and had learnt weapons, yes, no question. But he didn't practice with weapons very much. And I think he believed what he was told by, Fujita Sensei, that at the end of his life, Sensei didn't actually use weapons. Now, I have no idea whether that's true or not, but so he didn't teach weapons very much. Now, I had been brought up from the very beginning. The man who came from Tokyo University did weapons as well. And I discovered in Europe, every single Shihan, Japanese Shihan, has his own weapons system. And so to my mind, it's very strange that they don't do weapons in the Hombu, but everybody else does outside. And of course in Iwama. And so we started teaching weapons. And I started teaching the kids the 31 kata. And so if you go to the dojo this evening, early enough, you will find them shouting out in English, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, as they go from 1 to 31. And it's worked. And so his dojo is Futaba no Sato, the main dojo. And so we have a relationship with our dojo that students are members of both.